Good evening, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Engel. I am the president of the Ward 6 Democrats, and I want to thank all of you for joining us this evening for this I-83 Forum educational session. This event, as you have probably just noted, is being recorded and it's going to be posted on our YouTube channel, hopefully tomorrow, but definitely later this week. The Ward 6 Dems host events like this as part of fulfilling our mission, which is to build community across the diverse neighborhoods of Ward 6, to elect Democratic Party candidates, to educate voters, which is what this evening is about, to support Democratic Party ideals and purposes, and to work towards DC statehood. And you can learn more about us at www.ward6dems.org. And with that, I want to turn it over to my Ward 3 counterpart, Bo Finley, to offer a word of welcome on this jointly hosted forum. Bo, go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much, Elizabeth, and thank you to the panelists for being here. Uh, I just want to thank everybody from Ward 3 who's made it out this evening. The Ward 3 Democrats, like the Ward 6 Democrats, are an official organ of the DC Democratic State Party, part of the Democratic National Committee. We are working very hard to educate our members and our friends and neighbors in Ward 3 about I-83. And please join us at ward3democrats.org. Thank you.
And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our events coordinator, Corey Bauman, who is going to introduce our panelists.
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. Hi, everyone. My name is Corey Bowen. Like Elizabeth said, I am the events coordinator here at the Ward 6 Dems. Thank you, all of you, and to all of our panelists for coming tonight. I know that Monday nights are usually not, you know, days that people want to have something immediately after work hours, but we definitely appreciate it, and we're all excited for productive conversation on the I-83 ballot initiative that we will all be voting on in November. From the Make All Votes Count side, we have Philip Pennell, who has been involved in DC Democratic politics for more than 3 decades. He's been elected to almost every position at every level of the DC Democratic Party, has served in every office, and worked in the administration of Mayor Williams. And he will be speaking for the Make All Votes Count side, which is the side that proposed ballot initiative. On the Vote No on I-83 side, we have Deidre Brown, who is a third-generation Washingtonian, a graduate of UDC's David A. Clark School of Law, is also very active in DC politics, a former ANC commissioner in Ward 3, and has held positions in the Ward 3 Democratic Party as well. Sitting in the middle of our two panelists tonight is Andrew Lightman, who is the managing editor of Capital Community News, best known for publications like Mid-City DC, Hill Rag, and East of the River. Being a local journalist, he has been deeply involved in local issues, and we are very grateful to have such a capable moderator tonight, helping us navigate the ballot initiative. We're going to have a very simple format here. Each side is going to have 10 minutes to present their case, and then after that, we'll go to questions. And assuming there's time, feel free to add questions into the chat. Elizabeth and I, like she mentioned, will be looking there. If we see any questions that we have time to add at the end, we will add them in. Best process would be either if you have a question in the moment, send it through in the chat. But if we get to a question and answer portion, feel free to use the raise your hand function in Zoom. And Elizabeth and I will queue you up and call on you when it's your time to shine. So with that, I will turn it over to Andrew. Let's get this started.
Hey, how are you all? I hope you're all having a good night at home. I'm never a big fan of Zoom. I prefer to do this kind of stuff in person, but did we flip a coin, Elizabeth, to figure out who's going to go first?
We don't, but I would say perhaps ladies first. So perhaps Deirdre Brown first, and then Phil Pennell, if that works.
Phil has no objection, and we'll reverse do they give closing remarks or not?
No.
All right, so let's just start with Deirdre. Go ahead, Deirdre. And we need her screen to be shared because I think she's got a PowerPoint for us.
It's saying it's disabled. Can you give me permission to share screen, please?
Not me, probably somebody else.
Yes.
Hang on.
Okay, no problem.
We should be all set now. Did it appear for you?
Yep, and
Excellent.
Pop up for you guys. Okay, can you see the screen now? Yes? Oh,
Yes,
perfect.
we
You got
can.
it. All right, great. Good afternoon. My name is Deirdre Brown. I am the chair of the Vote No on Initiative 83. We are recognized by the Office of Campaign Finance as a initiative recall committee for against Initiative 83. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the myths and facts about Initiative 83. So what is Initiative 83? If Initiative 83 is successful, it would change the way elections are held in the district. It will allow for ranked choice voting, also known as instant runoffs, and it will allow for semi-closed primaries. In other words, it will allow for independent voters to vote in the primary election. Vote No on Initiative 83 is a grassroots campaign formed in part to educate the public about the facts and myths around ranked choice voting and semi-closed primaries. I'm sure you've seen the signs and heard the slogan, "Make all votes count." This sounds great, but it is a false statement created to confuse and mislead the average voter. In our current system, all votes are counted. However, in a ranked choice voting system, also known as instant runoff system, many votes will be discarded and not counted. Votes are eliminated. As noted in Mark Fisher's Washington Post September 11th article, the proposed law is 2,326 words long and includes 11 definitions. So I'm going to assume most of you have not read it, so let me explain it to you in plain language. How it works is that you rank up to 5 candidates, even if you do not know anything about the candidate or have any strong feelings one way or another about the candidate. According to the definition section of the proposed law, votes are eliminated when there is deemed to be an inactive ballot and are not counted. An inactive ballot means a ballot in which there is an overvote, undervote, or skipped vote. If there is a tie, there will be a random drawing via cast lot where one candidate is eliminated randomly to break the tie. Basically, if the voter gives more than one candidate the same ranking, ranks a candidate more than once, or skips a ranking, their ballot is eliminated. If 2 candidates are tied, one ballot is randomly eliminated. Exhausted ballots in ranked choice voting system do not count towards the tally either. While many ranked choice voting ballots are thrown out due to voter error and following convoluted instructions, ballots that follow the instructions to the letter can also be thrown out away because the voter ranked candidates who are no longer in contention. As candidates are eliminated through multiple rounds of tabulations, voters have their ballots exhausted if they only rank candidates that have been removed during successive rounds. Elections are as they are today are about choosing a candidate of your choice, the one that shares your values, and as long as you do that, your vote is counted. With ranked choice voting, if you make a mistake when ranking your 5 preferences from who you like the most to who you like the least, your ballot could become inactive or exhausted. Ranked choice voting eliminates and suppresses votes. So let's look at a real election. In Arlington County in 2023, for their county board primary, they used ranked choice voting, and here's the results. A brief glance at that data proves ranked choice voting is completely unfair and undemocratic, even when all the candidates hold the same party affiliation. Notice how in this race for 2 board seat nominations, Mary Coffey, the woman who would have finished 3rd in a normal primary, was able to announce victory before Susan Cunningham, the woman who received the most first-place votes. More importantly, recognize that Natalie Rowe was eliminated despite having more first-place votes than Coffey. Rowe also held leads over Coffey in rounds 2 and 3, yet went home empty-handed. Because of ballot exhaustion, winners of ranked choice voting races do not necessarily represent the choice of all voters who participated. Ranked choice voting claims to promote the majority of votes, but in reality, ranked choice voting creates an artificial majority because the winner may have 50% of the votes after rounds of eliminations, but still not have the majority of the total of the votes cast. Confused yet? Well, voters will not only be confused, but become frustrated and disillusioned when candidates with fewer first choice votes prevail. This is not a method to honor the choice of the voters. So whose votes are historically eliminated? Ranked choice voting research shows that when asked to rank 3 candidates, the ability to do so accurately was lowest among African Americans, Hispanics, and those whose first language is not English. Ranked choice voting suppresses and eliminates the counting of Black and brown votes. It has been shown that ranked choice voting suppresses the votes of seniors and those with disabilities. Ranked choice voting studies show that seniors and persons with disabilities are more likely to have their ballots discarded due to undervoting and overvoting. An academic study out of the University of Minnesota concluded that ranked choice voting in quotes, favors white voters and affluent who turned out at a higher rate, completed their ballots more accurately, and were more likely to use all the opportunities to rank their most preferred candidates compared to voters living in low-income neighborhoods and in communities of color. Many states, cities, and counties now regret having implemented ranked choice voting and have or are in the process of repealing it, citing that ranked choice voting is confusing and a convoluted method of voting. In addition, this system has resulted in thousands of discarded ballots, widespread voter errors, delayed election results, suspect recounts, and consequently diminished voter confidence. We know that public trust in elections matter. This is why 10 states, Florida, Tennessee, South Dakota, Idaho, Kentucky, Montana, Oklahoma, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana have banned ranked choice voting over the last 2 years. Ranked choice voting is approved at the statewide level only in Maine and Alaska. However, in Alaska, on this November's ballot, there's a measure aimed at repealing the 2020 voter initiative that replaced party primaries with open primaries and instituted ranked choice voting. It took only one statewide ranked choice election for citizens to begin circulating petitions to get rid of the measure. Alaskans' reasons for rejecting ranked choice voting are numerous. But to start, 11% of the ballots in Alaska in 2022 were spoiled due to voter confusion under ranked choice voting system, more than 3 times the normal rate. During the state special at-large congressional election, nearly 15,000 Alaskans had their ballots thrown out. This included more than 11,000 tossed because voters selected only one candidate without ranking any others. When that candidate was eliminated, their votes were eliminated as well. So let's talk about the semi-closed portion of the initiative. The biggest myth is that closed primaries disenfranchise independent voters. All eligible voters can vote in the general election and can vote in the primary election if they are registered with a party, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, or the Green Party. If you're not registered with a recognized party, you are considered unaffiliated or independent. Let's remember that primary elections are nomination elections. It is when political parties pick the candidate that will represent their party in the general election. Under the Home Rule Act, primary elections in the district are partisan. Political parties in the district have the right to pick who they want to represent them in the general election. There's no interest fee or criteria to register with a party, but if you do not register with a particular party, you do not get to pick their candidates. Just like any other club or association you belong to, only registered members are allowed to vote. Non-members do not get to vote in your election. This is an attempt to meddle in nomination elections by letting nonpartisan voters influence the outcomes of primary elections. Closed primaries is not disenfranchisement. It is freedom of association and the right to political autonomy, free of outside interference. Local proponents of I83 present a local face under the banner, Make All Votes Count. However, a look at their campaign finance reports show that efforts are largely driven by outside special interest groups such as Rank the Vote and Fair Vote Action PACs who are financing the campaign. These groups are not based in DC, but represent outside interests seeking to influence DC politics. Fair Vote Action PAC has donated over $102,000, and California-based All One God Faith, Inc. has contributed over $280,000. According to their last September 10th Office of Campaign Finance report, they have raised approximately $464,000. So that means from these two entities alone, 82% of what they've raised has come from just those two special interest groups. But let's break it down some more. You will see here that based on their financial reports, of the total that's been raised through their September 10th report, 68% came from outside of DC corporations, 22% came from outside of DC PACs, political action groups, 59% came from outside of DC individuals, and only 3% came from DC donors. Why are outside entities hiding behind local faces? We consider this a blatant attack by outside money in an attempt to push a national agenda of voter suppression to reshape who our elected officials are and what they look like. So why should you vote no? 1, ranked choice voting is an instant runoffs, which is designed to suppress the Black and brown vote and has, as discussed, has been shown to eliminate the votes of people of color, seniors, low income, and persons with disability. 2, it violates the belief that small grassroots donors should have power in elections and not corporate interests. The opponents are funded by outside corporate interests, PACs, and non-district donors. And 3, allowing independent voters to vote in partisan nomination elections without having to party register violates the Home Rule Act. It also violates your commitment to DC statehood efforts and your understanding that DC statehood is a matter of racial justice. An attack on Home Rule is an attack on DC statehood. We must stop letting ranked choice voting spokespeople tell us that the only solution is to implement bad election reform. Challenge them with everything you've seen here tonight. If you would like to get involved, you can visit us at voteno.com or voteno83.com or on socials at voteno83. Thank you so much. I'm trying to unshare. Hold on. Sorry.
All right, Phil, you're up.
There you go.
All right. Good evening, Wards 3 and 6 Democrats. And I really appreciate this opportunity to present the pro side of Initiative 83. I'm Philip Pennell, and I am the treasurer of Make All Votes Count DC, the campaign committee. Since the inception of fair elections, which is a good thing, we have seen larger. We've seen a larger array of candidates and a larger number. And what happens in a situation like that is that we're now witnessing more candidates winning with small pluralities, and also in certain cases winning very narrowly. If you are a majoritarian Democrat, and by that I mean if you feel that a candidate should be elected with a simple majority, then there is a need for reform here in the District of Columbia. And ranked choice voting offers that reform. Ranked choice voting is not a new concept. It's been around for around 100 years. In Australia and New Zealand, I encountered it when I was in graduate school at Howard University in political science. And ranked choice voting will basically let people rank their preferences. So many times they're in multi-candidate races. There are people who will say, "Oh, I like you, but my first choice is my friend, but I wish, that I could vote for you as my second choice." Well, this gives them the opportunity, because the initiative would allow, in races where there are 5 or more candidates, the voters to actually rank their choices. And ranking of choices is something that we do all the time in our daily lives. Here in the District of Columbia, when parents engage in the school lottery, they rank the schools. When people apply for public housing, they rank they rank where they prefer to live, and this would give the voters a chance to do that. And by doing that, it may inject more civility into the electoral process, because if a candidate at least wants to be a person's second choice, hopefully that person will conduct him or herself with some civility, so that he or she will still be on the voters' minds. Currently, we have no process for even a simple runoff, and if we had simple runoffs, which would be an improvement over what we have now, but a simple runoff would be more costly, and also people who vote the first time many times do not come back. So ranked choice voting is also called instant runoff voting, because it would eliminate the need for that. Now, if you're not a majoritarian Democrat and you are satisfied with the status quo, then you would not be in favor of ranked choice voting, or you wouldn't be in favor of simple runoff voting. Just recently, in Ward 7, where we had, I think it was 9 or 10 candidates for council. The winner won with like 24% of the vote. It turns out that 55% of the people who voted in that election did not vote for either the first or the second candidate. So at least with ranked choice voting, there would have been that instant runoff so that the winning candidate would have gotten to a majority of the vote, as defined as simply 50% of the vote plus one. I'm very thankful that the Ward 3 Democrats several months ago voted to support ranked choice voting. And I hope that other Democrats who are reform minded will support Initiative 83. The second part of Initiative 83, which would permit independents to vote in primaries, is simply expanding the democracy. Here in the District of Columbia, 1 out of every 6 registered voters is an independent. And in our very, very blue jurisdiction, and I say very blue because if DC were a state, we would be the bluest state. Biden won with over 90% of the vote last time. So here in the District of Columbia, we know that most of the times the main action, the main attraction is in the Democratic primary. And independents who are taxpayers, who pay for a system and a process that basically excludes them, should be brought into the process. If you are a reform-minded progressive Democrat, things are changing. My fellow Democrats, the latest Gallup poll concerning party identification in the United States shows that 52% of Americans consider themselves independents. The Republican and Democratic parties basically divide the other part of that electoral pie. Kamala Harris and Governor Walz are not going to win in November with just Democratic votes. They need independents. We should be big enough as Democrats to invite independents to participate in our primaries. Those voters would be very much ideologically like-minded. And also, we would be expanding our coalition. We would be increasing participation in the primary. And we would very much be helping to develop a coalition of conscience. Things are changing, particularly young people no longer feel attracted to the two-party system and are registering in droves as independents. We want to capture those people. And we should be magnanimous enough to permit independents to vote so that they can try before they buy. Democrats should not be so wedded to the status quo that we're basically endorsing an exclusionary system. Now, I hear people talk about, well, it's freedom of association. You can select the party of your choice. Well, freedom of association was the calling card of racial segregationists. And that we knew many times that their freedom of association and their restricted country clubs and golf courses excluded people of color, women, gays, etc. And there were public policy being discussed and decided in those type of venues. The same situation is occurring here in the District of Columbia, where the the Democratic Party pretty much decides who's going to win in the primary, and then they imperiously present to the independents in the general election of their choices. We need to stop treating independents as if they were not stepchildren, but stepped on children. And also in too many cases, we see low voter turnout, and by inviting independents and permitting them to vote in our primaries, we will see an increase in that, and this will help to keep. I would say public elected officials more accountable, and they would also have to work harder in the elections because the electorate would be expanded. In terms of
Mr. Pennell, I did want to alert you, we are getting close to 10 minutes. So,
okay,
thanks.
what do I have? A minute left?
Yeah, about that.
Okay, I just wanted to say, in terms of our finances, in any type of initiative, of course, you want to get outside funding from people who share who share those same values. I today gave a contribution to the Amendment 4 in Florida, which would actually instill in their Constitution a woman's right to choose her reproductive health. So we have progressives from across the country who are contributing to our cause. There's nothing nefarious about that. But also, most of our donations are small donations coming from DC residents. Our last report showed approximately around 150 donations, which is 9 times the number of registered DC voters who support the initiative than those who contributed to our opponents. Thank you.
Thank you guys very much for both your comments. And we'll start with some questions. Ranked choice voting seems pretty simple in single selection races like the ward council race. How would this work for the at-large race where we have several candidates running? And let's start with Ms. Brown, and then we'll go to Phil.
I'm sorry, Andrew, what was the question again? I didn't hear you.
How does this work in a multi-candidate at-large race?
That's a good question. I think because, this is all up for grabs, but I think it's going to be similar to how they did it, the chart that I showed you for the county board, where they had I think they had 7, I don't have it in front of me now, 7 or 9 people running, and then they went through 7 tabulations of it to get to the top 2. So I think that would be the same here. We do know that at least one, because of home rule, that the seats have to be 2 of the seats have to be non-Democratic seats. So they have to be, they normally end up being independent seats. It could be Green Party or Republican, but and so that would have to be factored in. So this is part of what the Board of Elections would need to do if this gets approved. They will have to come up with a voter education, voter guide, telling people how to vote, especially in the at-large positions. And of course, they would need updated software and election materials.
Oh, hold on. Let me drill down this, and then I'm going to go to Phil.
Yes.
Let's say at the end of the rounds, we have 2 Democrats at the end, and one of them is a reserve position. How does that work?
What is a reserve position?
One of them is a reserve seat, because as you know, we have this undemocratic part of our charter that reserves seats for non-Democratic Party people.
Yeah, so that can happen, right? So this, all I can tell you is that the initiative as is written, it doesn't exactly reference that. So what I'm assuming the Board of Election will have to do is you would have to possibly have 2 sections on the ballot.
Well, let's go to Phil. Maybe since he's an advocate, maybe he can explain how that would work. Phil, we get down to the end of the rounds, and there are 2 Democrats. but one of the seats is reserved for a non-Democrat. How does that work?
Well, that would not happen, Andrew, because the Democratic primary would have already taken place, and so the
Right, but
Democratic
we're in the
nominee,
at-large
yeah,
race.
yeah, so the Democratic nominee would have advanced in the general election. So the candidates that you would have for at-large council in our current system would be the party nominees and also independent candidates. So then it would be a situation in terms of a candidate.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, getting the 50%, and then it would keep going until the second person came in with
All
the
right, so
50%.
basically what you're saying is there can be only one. It's like Highlander with the Democrats.
Well, I mean that that's our home rule charter, which
Okay.
which mandates that two of the at-large candidates cannot be from the majority party. I think that should
So,
be amended, amended. But that
so
would
let
be
me
the
go to
way it
you for the
works.
second question. Is this going
Mhm.
to be used for president, shadow rep, shadow senator, and House delegate?
Yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, ranked choice voting is used in the presidential election in Maine.
Okay. Let's go back to Deirdre for a minute to start the next question. Have our local parties, the DC Green Party, the Statehood Party, and the GOP, expressed an official position that you're aware of?
That I'm aware of. Of course, the DC Democratic State Committee, as everyone knows, has taken a general body vote and they voted against Initiative 83. The Republican Party has, in general, been against Initiative 83. I haven't spoken to them directly. I'm sorry, against ranked choice voting. I have not spoken to them about Initiative 83. And then the Green Party, there was a representative who spoke at the DC Democratic Party. I can't remember his name at the moment. He said he was a member of the Green Party and he was against Initiative 83, mostly because of the semi-closed primary portion. But if you're asking if either of those parties have made an official statement to me or that I know of, the answer would be no.
Phil, are you aware of anything?
I'm only aware of basically what I've heard and seen in the media. I know that the chair of the Republican Central Committee, Patrick Maher, was on TV saying that he was opposed to Initiative 83, but at the same time, he said that he was in favor of what is called a jungle primary, and that would be an election where anybody could run, and the top two people would be chosen regardless of their party affiliation.
So
But
let me go
I don't
back
know
to
if the libertarian.
right. Let me move to the next question since we're not really. Why did you guys decide to do both sort of pieces of this in one initiative?
Well, for those of us who are progressive reformers who are trying to expand democracy, it was only logical that these two that these two components help to expand democracy, end voter suppression, and make candidates work harder and be more accountable. Also, it's a matter of maximizing of your resources. There was some people who who are for letting independents vote, who may be newcomers to ranked choice voting, and vice versa. So that we all came together. I'm going to be very
Why did
honest
you,
about
if you're
it.
going to
Well,
let
I've
in,
been for ranked choice.
if you're letting independents into the party primaries, why not make the whole thing nonpartisan, which you could have done? Make the city
Because
council races
that would be a
nonpartisan.
violation of the home rule charter, from what I from what I understand. I mean, and theoretically, I'm not opposed to that type of reform, but that currently, and we are constrained in terms of what we can do. And also, I want everyone to please keep in mind that there are only 13 states and the District of Columbia that have a closed primaries. Most of the people in the United States have systems where independents can participate, and there are active campaigns throughout the nation to end closed primaries. Case in point, in Pennsylvania, five former governors signed a letter calling for an end to the closed primary system. And one of the signatories is Ed Rendell, a former governor of Pennsylvania, who was also the chair of the Democratic
Phil,
National
let's
Committee.
let Ms. Brown get in here for a sec. Do you want to comment on this?
Yes, thank you. You can't stop Phil, right? Once it gets started. So he said a lot. Listen, this is a violation of home rule. They've tried to circumvent the Home Rule Act. And a lot of people I've spoken to do not like that they're mixed with apples and oranges, right? They've mixed these.
How is this a violation of home rule exactly?
Home rule calls for partisan elections. All right. And so, I mean, they're trying to circumvent it. But nevertheless, when a lot of people come to me and talked about they do not like the two are together, that it is a mixture of apples and oranges, in that maybe if it had been separate, they might have been able to get behind it. As far as the I think he made a comment, he keeps making a comment about accountability and working harder. I can tell you, as having been a candidate, running for office in this city is a lot of work. And you do talk to everybody. I don't know any candidate who doesn't do that. And so that's just, once again, a fallacy, promises being made about how this is going to change the elections, when in fact it won't really change it's just going to change who's doing the voting.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
By the way, there are candidates that choose not to talk to anybody. There's one running in Virginia right now.
Well, this is the district.
I'm joking.
Right. I know we keep talking about all these other states, but where DC is a very special place, and we need to focus on the residents here.
Let's move to the next question.
But Andrew, may I respond to something there?
Yeah.
Well, I want to give an example right here in terms of where I live, Ward 8, and in my Ward 8 council member, by the way. The incumbent Ward 8 council member during the primary did not attend most candidate forums, so he wasn't talking to everybody. He didn't even respond to the questionnaires of the AARP or of the Washington Post, because he knew that he had cultivated and nurtured a base of support in this ward where he really wouldn't have to work that hard in order to get elected. Things might have changed if the independents in this ward had been able to vote in the primary, and then the ranked choice of voting calculations would have kicked in, because he won by a little less than 52% of the vote. So no, not every candidate talks to everyone.
Well, when they don't
show up at candidate forums and don't respond to questionnaires.
Well, your Ward 8's, I have another question for you. We'll start with you, because this was addressed by Ms. Brown, but not so much by you in the presentation. What is ballot exhaustion, and what happens to a person's vote if their ballot becomes exhausted? Phil?
Well, if the ballot becomes exhausted, that means that they may have chosen not to rank 5 candidates in a contest where there are 5.
More importantly, let's say I vote for green and purple, right? And because of this whole ranked choice, neither green or purple end up on top. So, and I have not chosen the top person. So essentially my vote sort of got thrown out, because maybe I didn't choose teal and orange, who were the 2 top vote getters. I chose brown and purple, and they didn't even make it into that round. What happens to my vote?
But theoretically, your vote has a chance of being put more in action with ranked choice voting than in the current system, where
Right.
there
But
is
in my
just one
scenario,
vote for one person. So if your person doesn't win, then your ballot
right,
is
but in
totally
my ballot, I
exhausted.
might not have voted for either of the ones that made it to the end, so my ballot just gets tossed. Ms. Brown, do you have a comment on that?
Yes, and that's part of the problem with ranked choice voting, that there's a lot of ballots that will get eliminated for a variety of reasons. It could be because it's exhausted, overvoting, undervoting, skip voting. So that whole, propaganda they have going saying make all votes count. They do. Right now, all your votes count. In ranked choice voting, there will be votes that will not be counted just because of how the tabulation.
Well, they're technically counted, but they don't count in the last round.
Or depending on how many rounds we go, last 3, 4, 5 rounds, right? Because these things can go on for multiple rounds. I do want to make a quick comment because I just want to say this out loud. Unless Mr. Purnell is in the head of Councilmember Trayon White, you don't know why he didn't attend or didn't do certain things. You're making assumptions. And I'm not defending him because I don't know him and I don't live in Ward 8. But the idea that because you have ranked choice voting, all of a sudden the candidate's going to do every candidate form and fill out every questionnaire that comes across their desk is just that, an assumption.
Well, I have to say, as somebody that organizes candidate forums, it's really hard to get their attention sometimes. She does have a point. Let's move to the next question. What happens to a ballot if, let's say, there are 5 people and I only choose 3? Let's start with Mr. Pinnell. What happens to my ballot?
If there are 5 candidates and
I choose 3, does my ballot get tossed?
Well, it depends on whom you voted for.
I always vote for Mitt now, so I'm sure it's going to get tossed. No, seriously.
Well, it would have had to be a situation where no one who's going into the second round was on your ballot.
Right, but it doesn't get if there are 5 choices and I choose 3, the whole ballot isn't thrown out, is it?
No, not at all.
Ms. Brown, do you have a comment on that one?
Yes. So if you go back to the initiative, and unfortunately I don't have it pulled up, but if you give me a second, I can pull it up and we can read in their definitions of what an undervote is. And then we make sure ballot what they call inactive. If you have an undervote is when you didn't use all of the rankings that you could have used, depending on, how many people are running. Let's say it was 7, so you need to rank up to 5. And in that case, your ballot is, quote unquote, as is written in the law that they wrote, inactive. Is in the definitions in the proposed legislation.
And inactive means what?
That it's no longer being counted, right? You can say thrown out, eliminated, whatever word you want to say. If you want to just be technically correct, is inactive. It's not being counted anymore. It's been put to the side. They're moving on.
Okay, so I have another question, and it's now highlighted in yellow, which means my compatriots really want me to ask this for you.
Okay.
So I'll ask it specifically, and we'll start with Phil on this. How will your position promote more participation in the final selection of those who will represent us? In the current situation, those who vote in the Democratic primary almost always determine who the final winner will be, hence disfranchising those who do not register as a Democrat. And I swear I do not have a pearl earring in my ear. Go ahead, Phil. You want to answer that question?
Well, I don't quite totally understand your question.
All right. So let me repeat it. How does your position promote more participation in the final selection of representation? In the current situation, those who vote in the Democratic primary almost always determine who the final winner will be of the election, hence disenfranchising those who are non-Democrats. So this goes back to your whole argument about
of expanding the electorate in terms of having the 1 out of every 6 registered voters here in the District of Columbia being able to participate in party primaries. Mathematically, that would automatically increase
but couldn't they simply expand?
The voter pool.
couldn't they simply register as a Democrat and join in if they
There
want?
are people there are people who for various reasons cannot register for parties in terms of their occupation and also sometimes for ideological reasons. As I said, like this whole idea of freedom of association may sound benign, but it's not. Uh, Basically, what Initiative 83 is doing is calling upon people who in party leadership to reform, to rethink how the parties are doing business in terms of choosing their nominees.
Okay,
They
let's let Ms. Brown jump in.
Yes. So the question what I normally hear, and I think what she's trying to say is that if you're independent, you're not allowed to vote in the primary election. Most likely, it's going to be a Democratic candidate, and the candidate is going to win in November. I think that's what she's saying, right? And how can we stop that? And the answer to that question is this ranked choice voting, this semi-closed primary is not going to stop that. We're in a blue bubble, like we're a Democratic state, so. Either way, that's what's going to end up happening. What I normally tell independents or anyone, if you're not happy with the council members that are sitting on the council or the mayor or your attorney general, then run other people. Run people that you support, who support your mission, your values, and that you want to see sitting there. This reform is not going to fix that problem.
All right, I want to go back to Phil for a second. Can panelists clarify, or let's have you clarify, Phil, what legal authority that you're resting on that has judged this initiative in that it's harmonious with our charter? Because I've heard at least Ms. Brown at least once say that it violates the charter, and other people have said that too. Who did you ask to figure out whether it violates home rule?
Well, the DC Board of Elections unanimously approved the language of the initiative as being suitable to be placed on the ballot. Now, the DC Democratic State Committee went to court. The first in the first judgment, they lost, and it's now in the Court of Appeals. So I guess it will be up to the courts to actually decide, if it indeed meets about
Ms. Brown?
ballot approval.
Yes.
Ms. Brown, do you want to comment?
So let me fact check that just a little bit. Just a little bit, Phil. Sorry. So the Home Rule Act does state that the election should be partisan. The initiative was able, yes, to get the Board of Elections. They used, they rewrote their original submission, rewrote it to try to get through. The DC Democratic State Committee filed in the Superior Court arguing that the measure was not appropriate. Home rule was one of the arguments they made. They made a bunch of arguments, and that case was dismissed due to a technicality. The attorney had filed the brief 1 day earlier than they should have. That's what's being argued at the Court of Appeals, whether or not it should be dismissed or not. So the issue has not been argued on the merits, is whether or not it violates home rule or not. That has not been argued on the merits.
All right, let's move to another question.
But Andrew,
yeah.
one thing I want to say: ranked choice voting in no way, or even opening the primaries to let independents vote, that would not stop the partisan nature of the elections. You would still, in the end, there would be candidates in the primaries who would be carrying the party label. Now, whether or not you decided who would vote in that is one thing, but you would still have a partisan election.
So I have another question, Ms. Brown and Phil. Could the parties, let's say Patrick Mara decided tomorrow that the Republican Party was going to allow independents into its primaries, they could do that, couldn't they? Or the Democrats or the Green State Party? right now without any change in the law.
What was the question again, Andy? I'm sorry.
Right? If the Democratic Party decided tomorrow that they were going to allow independents to vote in their primary, they could do that.
Oh,
I'm not sure of that, Andrew. I'm not. I'm I'm not a lawyer. Maybe, but
Ms. Brown is a lawyer. It's
yeah.
good
But
I'm not going to answer that question because I don't know the answer to it.
Yeah.
I really don't know how that would work mechanic wise. What would need to happen? I would think that in order for that to happen, there would be at least some changes to legislation at some point, at some level.
Okay, fair enough. Now I want to build on that.
Excuse me, Andrew.
Yeah.
Andrew, but I'm thinking your question, has me thinking about the situation that's in Maryland. And in Maryland, Maryland has on the books that that the parties would be that they would be allowed to let independents vote in their primaries if the party leadership notifies the office of the Secretary of State prior to a primary election. So Maryland has it on the books, but it has to be triggered if they want it.
Okay,
But I'm not sure if that would work in the District of Columbia.
All right, let me ask one other quick question, and we'll do two more, and then we're probably going to need it to wrap. Let's talk about the how this works. So the parties would still can conduct their primaries as they do now. Voters from a party would still vote in that primaries they do now. So we're really talking about registered independents, and they would have the option to vote either in a party's primary if they chose to or not. Is that how this is going to work, Phil? So if I'm an
Yes.
independent, after your initiative passes, I can say, "Oh, I can go work in the." I decide this year I want to vote in the Democratic primary. I can do that.
Yes. Yes.
Ms. Brown, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, so apparently what's going to happen is BOE will have put some kind of mechanism in place where an independent will get to pick which ballot they get. So they'll either get a Democratic ballot, Republican, or Green Party, and then they can vote using that ballot, because we get mail-in ballots at the moment.
All right, and this is just a housekeeping question. If the Board of Elections mails ballots out to every single registered voter, how would they know which one to vote, mail for an independent?
Right, so that's what I'm saying. They're going to come up with some kind of process where independents will have a certain deadline to tell them which one they want. I don't know what the process is going to look like.
And let's all right. Let me go back to one other question. Earlier this month, Congress's second strongest statehood advocate, Jamie Raskin, along with several other Democrats, introduced a bill to bring RCV to all congressional elections. Would you lobby for House Democrats to stand with Mike Johnson and Jim Comer to defeat the bill? Either one of you.
What is your question, Andrew?
All right. So Raskin and other Democrats have introduced a bill to bring ranked choice voting to all congressional elections.
Yes.
Would you? Well, this obviously you would lobby for House Democrats to support that, right, Phil?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
And Ms. Brown, Mike Johnson and Jim Comer apparently don't like RCV. You're going to support? You're going to lobby? Are you going to join them in lobbying other Democrats to oppose it?
I don't know.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, once again, this is a DC issue. I can't really say nationwide what's best.
And one last question. Do both of you support removing the home rule requirement of reserving seats for minority parties?
I do not think it should be removed.
I do. You know, like I, you know, like I'm not for any type of set aside. And what it has led to is a certain, I would say, a certain disingenuousness on the part of a number of people who basically changed their party registration to independent just for the pure purpose of running. And sometimes if they lose, they come back to the Democratic Party, which
Oh,
is
you mean like
always
Kenny
good. Prodigal
McDuffie?
sons are welcome, but yeah. Well, I mean, the thing about it is that the current the way that it is written with that set aside, it actually encourages that type of behavior. I'm not saying that the people are being dishonest, but they're basically taking advantage of a loophole. And
So
but
let's
I'm for the repeal of that to
okay,
two seat set
we're hitting
aside.
time. So Elizabeth, do you want to
Yep.
say, do you want to
Yep.
wrap?
Yep. I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. So let me get back to, for purposes of our recording, single speaker. Okay, there we go. Great. So I wanted to thank Andrew Lightman, who's the managing editor of Capital Community News and best known to those of us in Ward 6 for his work with the Hill Rag for moderating for us tonight. I also wanted to thank Philip Pinnell and Deirdre Brown for joining us to educate us about this important topic that is going to be on the ballot you will be receiving fairly shortly from the Board of Elections. I wanted to thank the Ward 3 Democrats for co-hosting this with us and for helping us to promote it. Mobilize is going to send you a follow-up asking for feedback, so please do let us know what you thought. And once again, I just want to encourage folks to go to ward6dems.org. And we have a lot of opportunities to help with GOTV this fall, both inside DC and particularly outside DC as we look at our national elections. So definitely check those out. And thank you to all of you for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.